Well, we're delighted today to speak to the Salem Witch Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, Alison DiMario. Alison, is that an Italian name?
Pardon me?
Is that an Italian name?
Yes, my husband is part Italian.
And of course, as you know yourself, Italy in itself has a long-standing tradition of witches, one in particular being Befana, who appears and bears gifts for children, much the same way as Santa Claus does in Ireland or across the United States. Talk to me about Befana.
Very familiar with the books by Tommy DiPaola called Old Befana, and I think this is a wonderful old folk tradition, and I think she's a very benign witch. I don't think there's anything very frightening about her as there are about other witch images in other cultures.
In Ireland, of course, Alison, we have witches who, though no longer garbed traditionally, gather together once a year around sites such as Newgrange, Howth, and, of course, up around the Dublin Mountains. Tell me something about those witches.
This is probably a neo-pagan group, and there are many around the world. There are some, of course, here as well, and they date their beliefs to ancient times before Christianity. It's an earth-based religion. I think similar to Druids, there are various neo-pagan groups, and there are certain days in the year, all based on the lunar year, certain days that are very important to people who follow those religions and those beliefs. And they're all based on the shortest and longest day of the year and the 2 days when light and dark are equal, because I think in the ancient world it was all about how much light, natural light there was in the world, and cause for great celebration as the days get longer until finally the longest day, the summer solstice, is a cause for great celebration among neo-pagan groups.
Well, now, of course, the Salem Witch Museum is America's only authentic museum, which spells the tale of the women who suffered and died in a most horrific way during the trials. Do you think that women suffer the same in society these days or not?
Well, first I need to point out that there were men involved in the Salem Witch Trials. 5 men were hanged and many more were accused. So it wasn't just women. There were more women, of course, than men. But in that time and in earlier times and probably in later times, it was believed that women were much weaker than men and therefore much more susceptible to the devil and much more likely to sign a pact with him, to sign his book as it was called then. Today, certainly there are areas in which women are not equal to men, but it's very, very different from when it was in the 17th century.
Talk to me about what the Salem Witch Museum has to offer people who are interested or curious about witchcraft.
First, we have a presentation that looks at the history of the Salem Witch Trials that took place in 1692 here. We have stage sets in the walls of a large auditorium. This building was originally a church, and the main body of the church is now an auditorium. The stage sets are set into the walls, and as the narration progresses on a soundtrack, each of the stage sets is lit in consecutive order so that you can see what some of the scenes of 1692 might have looked like. For instance, there's a scene of some of the children, the so-called afflicted girls, sitting around a fire with Tituba, who was one of the first people to be accused of practicing witchcraft. There's also a trial scene of Rebecca Nurse's trial. There is a prison scene. There's also a hanging scene of Burroughs, who was one of the men who was hanged during the Salem trials. Then, after that presentation ends, and that takes about a half an hour, we have an exhibit called Witches Evolving Perceptions. And that looks at larger issues surrounding the word witch, because it's a very complicated word, and it depends on where you are and who you are as to how you define it. So that exhibit is a walkthrough exhibit. We have figures, one portraying a Celtic midwife, one portraying a stereotypical witch, and 2 that talk about the practice of witchcraft today. We also give examples of witch hunts from different periods in our history, so our visitors can see that the Salem Witch Trials was just a model for a witch hunt. There have been subsequent witch hunts as well. Considering
young kids that are just coming out of high school who, wear the garb and wear the makeup and knock around town claiming that they are witches, what would you say to them?
Oh, I think that's something that just appeals to kids. I used to teach high school, and of course there were kids that like to consider themselves to be kind of dark, wearing dark clothing and sort of the gothic look. I think that's just a phase that a lot of kids go through. There are people who take witchcraft very seriously, older people who study it and become initiated and join covens and lead their lives according to the tenets of witchcraft or Wicca. But kids, I think it's just an appeal that, you want to be a little different and look different and maybe look a little frightening. But I don't think it's anything very serious.
Talk to me a little bit, if you will, about Wicca.
Wicca is an ancient earth-based religion. Goes back again to pre-Christian times. The people who practice Wicca worship a goddess and a god. They believe that anything you do comes back to you 3 times, so that's one of the great rules of their belief, and that, of course, would prevent you from doing anything harmful to anyone else. They also believe that anything you do is all right as long as it hurts no one else, and so it's quite an individual belief. You can join a coven, you can be an individual practitioner, but no matter which way you do it, you are very connected to the cycles of nature, the phases of the moon, the changing seasons, and I think it's a very benign, a very kindly religion. There is no hierarchy. There are, as I mentioned, only 2 major rules. There are nice rituals that celebrate the coming of the growing season. All the seasons are celebrated, and so I think it's something that appeals to people who are not very happy with more structured and established religions.
Now, the Salem Witch Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, draws crowds from all over the world, of course, and of course all over the United States. What do you think draws the crowds to your museum as opposed to any other site in the world?
Well, I think that the word witch is fascinating to people because I think there's a little mystery about it. No matter how you define it, there's something that maybe can't be defined. And there is also the interest in the history of the Salem Witch Trials because it's a very human and a very touching story. You can find out about the 20 victims. You can read their answers to the questions they were given. You can find out a little bit about their lives. I think that appeals to people's imagination. And I also think many people have read The Crucible by Arthur Miller. It's performed and read in all the high schools in this country and probably around the world, and that increases interest. It's not exactly an accurate portrayal of the Salem Witch Trials, but it does concern the Salem Witch Trials and some of the issues that history brings up. So I think that has an effect. And then, of course, if it's getting close to October, the idea of Halloween, which is a very popular holiday here, draws people because they think maybe they'd like to be in Salem for Halloween. There's, of course, no connection between Halloween and the witch trials, but the same word appears in both. I mean, witches are always connected to Halloween. Actually, in the practice of witchcraft, Samhain, which is October 31st, it's a very important day to them, and they are very visible during the Halloween season in Salem because they want people to understand what they believe and what they don't believe.
Alison, also, you have a wonderful variety of gifts in your museum. Tell me something about the bestseller in your museum.
We do have a lot of all kinds of things in our gift shop, and I think our buyer could probably tell you what sells the best. But I know we have little black cats that people love. We sell those by the hundreds. I'm in charge of ordering the books, and I can say that some of our books sell extremely well. They're histories of the Salem trials, and some of them just fly out of, I shouldn't use that word, some of them sell extremely well.
Alison DiMario, thank you very much, from the Salem Witch Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alison.
You're welcome, Sean.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
What's it called? It's called Radio Irish. RadioIrish.com, I hear. Alright. And what do you have to do? You just log on, do you? Yeah, you just log on. It's so easy. Even a mechanic could do it.
It's inventive, informative, ingenious. Broadcasting 24/7 to the Irish community. This is Radio Irish. RadioIrish.com. RadioIrish.com.